As Colleen said, we've been in a series of messages entitled The Miracles of Jesus, and we've been studying many of the miracles that Jesus did, and we've been applying them to our lives. So I'm going to get right into it today. Today's message is called Calming the Storm. Calming the storm. This is a very popular miracle from Jesus, and it really applies to our life. We're going to read out of Matthew's account of this. Matthew 8, chapter 8, verses 23 through 27. Matthew gives an account of this. So do Mark and Luke as well. The Synoptic Gospels, all three of them, they talk about this. And so we're going to pick up from Matthew's version of this, starting with verse 23. Then he, Jesus, got into the boat, and his disciples followed him. Suddenly, a furious storm came upon the lake so that the waves swept over the boat. Now, isn't that how the storms of life kind of hit us? Suddenly, they come, right? And they begin to overwhelm us. They begin to swell up over us. How many of you guys remember COVID-19? The moment that you realize, wait, everything is shut down? Y'all, I remember it because I was looking forward to March Madness in the NCAA tournament, and I will never forget hearing that the tournament had been canceled. I was like, man, this is about to be serious, because if they are canceling the NCAA tournament with all the money that comes along with the NCAA tournament, like suddenly they're doing this, I'm like, oh my goodness, this is like pretty serious for them to do that. You guys remember that moment when COVID-19 suddenly hit you, where you realize, oh my gosh, things are about to like go crazy. We're going to be off of work. We're going to be whatever those things are, like whatever you had to go through, and that suddenly came upon you. That's how the trials of life often hit us. And so I'm comparing what Jesus is going through this storm to how different things impact our lives. But look what the next part of that verse says. But Jesus was sleeping. I love that. We'll talk about that. Verse 25. The disciples went and woke him up, saying, Lord, save us, we're about to drown. Now, just so you know, this is not just some normal storm. This thing was a massive storm. So for this to say Jesus was sleeping, it was wanting you to know, like this, he was sleeping through some stuff, right? And the disciples are concerned, like at some point, these waves are going to overtake this boat and we're going to drown. He replied, you of little faith, why are you so afraid? Then he got up, he rebuked the winds and the waves, and it was completely calm. Everybody say completely calm. Verse 27, then the men were amazed and asked, what kind of man is this? Even the winds and the waves obey him. What kind of man is this? This is the Son of God, Jesus Christ, the miracle worker, the one who is the same yesterday, today, and forever. I hope you've been seeing through this series who this Jesus really is. These miracles, him having power over nature, shows his divine nature. He is a part of the Godhead. He always was. He existed before time, and he will exist through all of time. This is Jesus, the Christ, the Son of the living God. We've been learning about him through all of his miracles, and with this miracle in particular, I just want to talk about how the storms of life come our way. We probably won't have a storm like this unless you are on a fishing boat somewhere in maybe the Atlantic or the North Pacific. But you will have storms in life that come your way. There will be many trials and tribulations that come your way. And we need to learn through this story of Jesus calming that storm that he can calm your storm. All right, and so I want to just give us 3 lessons from this miracle story today. Number 1, sometimes Jesus has us follow him into the storm. Sometimes Jesus has us follow him into the storm. Matthew 8:23, it says, then he got into the boat and his disciples followed him. Notice, Jesus actually leads them into the storm. He doesn't take them around the storm. And I want you to know who Jesus is. He is the all-knowing one. He would know what he is about to get into, what the disciples were about to get into. And he doesn't lead them away from the storm. He doesn't actually take a moment and say, look, there's bad weather coming, so we're not going to go. He actually gets in the boat knowing what they're about to do, and he leads the disciples into the storm. This is the way of the master teacher. Remember, this is the disciples' formation time. This is where they're being discipled for the rest of the ministry that they're going to carry when they're going to lead the church for the next century after Jesus had passed away and was resurrected into eternal life. And so he is wanting them to learn some lessons. And this actual moment of the storm was the classroom for the disciples to grow their faith. This is the master. This is the teacher. His way of discipleship is teaching us through moments like this, for us to go through certain tests, for us to go through certain trials, to grow our faith so that we will be taught for the next chapter of our life. This is exactly what James says in James 1, verses 2 through 3. Look at the scripture, and it's very clear. Dear brothers and sisters, when troubles of any kind come your way, consider it an opportunity for great joy. Do you guys consider your trials an opportunity for great joy? If we understand what can come out of the trial, that's where the joy can come. But oftentimes we're just so stuck on the wind and stuck on the waves and stuck on the lightning and stuck on the thunder and stuck on the shaking and stuck on all the stuff that is happening. We don't count it all joy. But if we would recognize that the Lord is actually using this opportunity like a classroom to test our faith, to grow our faith, that's where we can count it all joy. For you know that when your faith is tested, he says, your endurance has a chance to grow. The reason why the Lord leads us to the storm is to grow our faith, to grow our character, to grow our endurance. Why? There are greater storms ahead. There are greater things ahead. These disciples who are worried about this storm, this is a small storm compared to what they were going to carry when they were leading the church. In that first century church after the death and resurrection of Jesus, they were called on the carpet to stand before all sorts of thrones, and they were threatened and their lives were put on the line for this same gospel. So Jesus said, I need to teach them how to trust in me even in the midst of danger. And this is why the Lord will use these same type of tests in our life. This is the reason why he doesn't always lead us around the thing. I wish the Lord every single time would lead me around in my own flesh. But I recognize actually it is better for me to go through some things, because if I go through it, I'm going to actually be stronger because of it. This is discipleship. This is discipline. This is why you go to the gym and lift some weights in the pain of that time. Nobody really likes to do it. Nobody likes to sit there on a treadmill and run and sit there and beat your body into submission. Nobody actually really likes that. But what we like is the benefit of it. The reason why we can count that all joy, and if you got a bodybuilder, somebody who really likes weightlifting, I got one on the front row, you know what I'm saying? Like, the only reason why they really like it and the joy that can come from it is because they've learned there are some results. There are some benefits. There's some growth. There's some character development because they actually beat their body into submission, right? Nobody actually really enjoys it in the moment, but you can count it all joy because you know there's a benefit through it. This is why Jesus leads us to different storms. I want you to know how my character and my faith has grown over the past 20 years. Matter of fact, my faith was forged in the middle of a storm in my life. It was 20 years ago in June. I was actually 20 years ago in May, I was expelled from high school for doing some stupid stuff. All right, I was expelled. I wasn't able to walk for my graduation. By the grace of God, I still was able to graduate. And it was one of those moments when I saw how that hurt my mom, and when I realized, man, this is tough, man. Like, I wish I was there at Conseco Fieldhouse and walking with my friends, on graduation. It got me thinking about my life. I was also graduating, so I had to realize some things like, where am I going? What am I doing with my life? And it was out of that storm, not knowing what was next, not understanding what was next, going through the shaking of that moment, that actually led me to the feet of Jesus like the disciples here. I went and I cried out to God. If you are real, God, I need you to reveal yourself to me. I don't know where I'm going right now in this life. I don't know what I'm about to do, but if you are real, I will follow you with all of my heart. I will do whatever you want me to do. I just need you to show up right now in the middle of the storm. And can I tell you, 20 years ago, the Lord showed up in my life and I have never been the same. It all started through a storm. Ever since then, there have been all types of storms that have grown my character and helped grow my faith as I've surrendered different things to the Lord. It's been storms of financial woes and storms of relationship problems and storms of different persecutions that have come my way and storms of health issues in my wife, storms of when I had COVID-19 for 12 days and I thought I was going to die, storms that have happened in this church, all sorts of storms that as I've went through those things, and like the disciples, I came to Jesus and surrendered another place of my heart to Jesus, I've grown in character. I've grown in faith. I've seen Jesus calm different things along the way in my journey. I recognize that no matter what I go through, he is the Prince of Peace. And I've learned that. How? Through the storms of life. This isn't just unique to the disciples. It's not just a unique experience for the pastor. This is a very usual Christian experience for any person wanting to grow their relationship with Jesus. Peter mentions this in 1 Peter 4:12. It says, "Beloved, do not think it strange concerning the fiery trial which is to try you." Don't think that this is a strange thing when you go through the storm. Don't think it's a strange thing when you actually have a trial that is not just like a trial, it's a fiery trial. You feel swallowed up by it. You feel like you're not gonna get through it. Just like these disciples. He says, don't think it's strange, as though some strange thing has happened to you. I want to encourage the church today. This is a normal, usual Christian experience. If you want to grow in your walk with the Lord, it's going to take some storms for you to go through to test your faith, to see where you're at, to bring up certain things that are still inside of you that only a storm can actually bring to the surface. If you know anything about a storm, you look at a beach after a storm, there's all sorts of things that are brought to the surface. You ever been walking down a beach after a major storm? You're going to see all types of stuff on that beach. Things that have been buried down deep on the ocean floor. It gets stirred up during a storm and it's brought to the surface. This is what happens. Why does the Lord want to bring us to the storm? It brings out our doubt. It brings out our fear. It brings out our insecurities. It brings out that we're very much still in control many times, and God's not on the throne of our heart. And it's the storm that brings that stuff to the surface so we can see it, we can deal with it, we can bring it to the master and say, Jesus, I hate that I'm impatient. I hate that I'm still fearful. I hate that I still am unbelieving. Lord, would you help me with these things? That's why he takes you to the storm. Now, you might just stay there, and instead of coming to Jesus, you stay in the same place. Well, this is what I've realized with Christians like that. You're going to go through that same storm over and over and over again, or that storm's going to wipe you out. Until you graduate through these things, you're going to keep on going through the same storm. But this is what the Lord will do because he's a good master teacher. He wants your growth more than your comfort. Y'all ain't with me today. He wants your growth more than your comfort. So he's going to lead you to the storm. But this is where I think Western Christianity often misses the mark in our teaching and our preaching. I think we teach avoidance of the storm more than embracing the storm. We want everything to be so easy in the Western church. We've been talking about, I'm not going to just let off of this either. Like, we're going to be on the Western church for a while because my whole next series is going to talk about it, okay? So I just want to just keep on reminding us the way of the master versus the way of culture. I want to remind us all the way of Jesus more than the way of our own comforts and our own flesh and our own ways. If our own ways and our own comfort and our own flesh was doing it, if that was really what was going to lead us to success and happiness, the world would be way happier than what we are, because the prime object of this world is to find some type of happiness, and they're still not finding it. We don't find happiness through self-gratification. We find happiness through self-sacrifice. Through dying to ourselves, to losing certain things so Jesus' throne and his dominion can be established. But we teach, we got to avoid these. Matter of fact, we even teach those who have real faith are the ones who will actually avoid these things in life. Like, we teach that. I've even taught it, and I'm going to get into more of this in my third point, but I'm just saying, like, this is the way so often that we hear these lessons, and I just want you to know, no, this is the usual experience. Why? Because Christ is trying to grow each one of us, and all of us have a long way to go. So there's some stuff we got to go through, stuff that will be squeezed out in us in the middle of these, but we don't want to go through it, and we actually think that we're actually holier if we don't go through these things. Let me get into this. You know why? You want to know why the Western church loves the pre-tribulation rapture? We ain't got to go through nothing. Jesus is going to save us before everything hits the fan. We're all going to beam out just like Star Trek, Scotty, whatever, tap our thing. Jesus is here. We're out of here before all the mess. This is a modern teaching, and it's a Western teaching. None of the church throughout all of the centuries of church doctrine ever taught a pre-tribulation rapture where you're going to get saved from every bit of the stuff that's going to hit the fan. But in American Christianity, in Western Christianity, we're like, oh, you know what? If you love the Lord and he's in your heart, you're going to get saved from it all. Yeah, tell that to our brothers and sisters in Iran right now, in North Korea right now, in Sudan right now, who their life is on the line every single day. They went to church this morning, and their life was on the line because they gathered with the body of Christ. Like, they went to a storm. They had to go through a storm. They go through a storm every time they gather with the church. And we're over here like, yeah, beam me up, Scotty. Get me out of it all. No, the Lord actually uses the storm to actually mature us. And I think if we would just embrace that and not think it a strange thing, we will actually trust the Lord in it, and we won't be shaken as much because we know the Lord is even in the storm. All right, so we need to understand this, that sometimes Jesus has us follow him into the storm. Here's the second lesson from this miracle story, is that Jesus isn't shaken by the storm. So this is good news, because we'll go through storms, but we need to know that Jesus isn't shaken ever by the storm. Verse 24, suddenly a furious storm came upon the lake so that the waves swept over the boat. But Jesus was sleeping. Y'all, I love this picture. I love to even think about this. Number one, it again shows the humanity of Jesus. He is both fully God and fully man. And this is a reason why we ponder this around Christmas. The God became flesh. And what does that all mean when he is fully God and fully man? We see him sleeping because as a man, he needed to sleep. But then we see the Godhead in him just ruling and reigning when he is sleeping through this storm, where waves are coming over the boat, and I can even imagine water splashing on Jesus at this point, and my dude is still out. Y'all ever know somebody that sleeps that hard through anything? You know what I mean? My wife has slept pretty hard at times, you know, where it's tough to wake her up. But like, Jesus is sleeping through a storm like this. Oh my goodness. We took a red eye back from the west, from out west, and we were coming back to Indy, and it was a late flight, so I was trying to sleep, right? But like, there was a guy behind us who had sleep apnea, so it's like he was like, you know, like that, like every chance I was about to close my eyes and fall asleep. dude's over here like choking to death. And I'm like, what the heck is what's happening, right? And then after my dude was doing that for a while, the guy in front of me kept dropping his big like metal water bottle, like, you know, Justin or I had, like, boom, it would fall on the ground. And I'd be like, oh my gosh, like I'm just trying to get some sleep, you know what I mean? And then the plane was getting rocked by turbulence. So that even woke me up a few times. I'm like, dude, I'm just trying to get some sleep. And it was Spirit Airlines. So yeah, I mean, working on a pastor's budget, I'm rocking Spirit, you know what I mean? And so, you know, there were definitely different things that were popping off because of that. And I'm like, I can't get any sleep. But when you look at Jesus in this story, he's over here completely asleep when the waves are splashing all around him, when the thunder and lightning is crashing all around him. We might be afraid, we might be uptight, we might be losing our mind when we go through the storms of life, but remember, Jesus isn't. Jesus isn't. Jesus wasn't shaken by that storm, and he isn't shaken by your storm. He is fully in control. He is the Prince of Peace. The waves obey his name. Nature is submitted to him. He is the one who is in control of it all. And if we would realize that, it will affect our peace in this life, and especially when we go through the storms of this life. When we know that God is sovereign, when we know that he sits on a throne, when we know that nothing in this world, whether it's COVID-19, a health diagnosis from your doctor, whether it is a friend who has betrayed you, whether it is some other financial woe that you're going through, none of that stuff kicks him off the throne. None of it. Pilate, a leader who was sentencing him to death. If Jesus wasn't wanting to go to the cross, if that wasn't the will of the Father for him to go to the cross, Pilate, all of those Roman soldiers could not stop Jesus if he wanted to get out of that situation. He could have called a legion of angels to come. He could have flexed his arms and really shown forth the glory that he manifested on the Mount of Transfiguration. Like he really could have done whatever he wanted to do, yet he laid down his life because he knew it was for us. Right? Jesus is on a storm. Whatever happens in this world will never shake him. The enemy might think he's getting ahead. Matter of fact, there's times where the enemy, like he will work and you're like, oh my gosh, like God, where are you? Yet God's even control of the enemy. Have you ever wondered why Satan still even roams the earth today? Like why after the resurrection did Jesus not actually cast him into hell then? Oh, I'm about to get too deep for y'all. Why? There's some type of purpose. He can't do evil. He will never tempt us with evil. But guess what? He still uses Satan. Because he's in control. He is sovereign. And we need to trust that. We need to understand that. If we do, that will affect our peace in this life when we go through it. Let me ask you this. How is your sleeping? Are you losing sleep? I got a Jitsi over here with a baby. I'm sure she's losing some sleep during the season. I literally said that right when I was looking at you holding the baby. I was like, she's probably losing some sleep. So this doesn't apply to her, although that's a type of storm. But how is your sleep through the trials of life? What's your anxiety level like right now? How much we understand what I'm talking about in this point will actually determine a lot of peace in our life. Jesus is asleep on a pillow in a boat that is rocking back and forth, that is getting overtaken by waves. Why? Because he is in perfect peace. Paul said this, a man who was stoned half to death many times and shipwrecked himself and beaten with whips from Roman soldiers and all this type of thing. He says, don't let your heart be troubled. Be anxious for nothing, but in everything with prayer and supplication, with thanksgiving, make your requests known unto God, and the peace of God that surpasses understanding. There is no reason for Jesus to be this peaceful in the midst of that type of storm. It's a peace that surpasses understanding. How do we get that? When we trust in a God who is fully in control. that I don't know why I'm going through the storm. I don't know when the storm's going to end. I just trust a God that got me. He has me. He has me. And so I can sleep. I can be at peace. Now listen, none of us are going to be perfect in this. I'll never forget getting a bill for $70,000 from St. Vincent Hospital after my wife had an emergency surgery 1 year into our church plant. I was a poor new pastor of Diversity Church. We did not have health insurance because I couldn't afford it at that time. I got a bill for $70,000. You think I was at perfect peace? Dude, I was like, oh my gosh, I might have to file medical bankruptcy. How's this gonna affect our house? How's this gonna affect me and Nicole Tavia? All this kind of stuff. And so that was a very troublesome time. Yet I came and I bowed before a Prince of Peace who has my financials in his hand. And I said, Lord, I don't know, we went through this storm. God, you got to take care of this thing. And we got back a letter a few months later that every dollar, every penny of that bill had been wiped out. I am so thankful that there is a God who loves me and has me in the middle of the storm. Back on that airplane, there was a little old lady sitting next to us. And she was sleeping like a baby, dude. Every time I woke up, I looked over at her just seeing if any of this was affecting her. And she was out. I was like, oh my goodness, how is she doing this? You got this dude choking behind us. You got a dude dropping his bottle around us. Nicole's got the middle seat. We're jittery and all that kind of stuff. This little old lady, she's out. And I think something that mature people, especially in the faith, teach me and have taught me in the past is that everything is going to work out in the end. So why worry? She is over there at peace, sleeping. Why? She'd been through some things. This woman had been through some things. This guy making noise behind us, this other dude making noise at us, being all jittery around us. It ain't affecting her. She's been through far worse. So she's at peace. And this is what somebody who's mature in the faith will teach you. Everything's going to work out in the end. All things work together for those who love God and are those who are called according to his purpose. It's all going to work out. And so the more we grow in our relationship, that is what is tested, and that is what's worked out of us. All of that fear and all of that anxiety and all of that worry and all of the hate and all of the other stuff, because we've seen God work out situation after situation and after situation. Why? Here's the third lesson from this story. Because Jesus cares about you in the storm. He cares about you in the storm. Let's go back to Matthew 8:25, and then we're going to read a verse from Mark's account of the same miracle. The disciples went and woke him up saying, Lord, save us, we're going to drown. Well, Mark's version goes even a little bit deeper. Mark 4:38 says what the disciples actually said to him. Jesus was in the stern, sleeping on a cushion. The disciples woke him and said to him, Teacher, don't you care? You ever felt like that in your time of great trial and tribulation? Lord, don't you care? Don't you see what I'm going through? Wake up. I don't know if you're sleeping in heaven, but I need you to come through for me now. Am I preaching to anybody today? Or am I just preaching to the pastor's wife and the pastor? She's back there doing our slides. Hallelujah. Teacher, don't you care if we drown? Make no mistake about it. No matter what you go through, Jesus cares. He cares. What does he do? He wakes up. He does correct them for their unbelief. I'm going to get to that here in a second. But then he does the miracle. He rebukes the wind and the wave. They all calm. Why? Because he cares. Because he cared about them. He doesn't want them to die in this moment. This is not what he willed in this moment. He cared about them. And so this is what he does. He calms the storm. Now, what I find interesting about this miracle, this is the first miracle that Jesus does where the disciples' lives are now on the line. Before this, it was other sick people whose lives were on the line. It was other situations where other people were in danger and Jesus had to come and heal that person. This time, now it's the disciples. If Jesus doesn't do something here, they're all dead, sunk, dead in the water. And so I find it interesting that this is the type of thing that pushed them to that place where they're frantic and they're doubtful and they're unbelieving. Why? Because their lives are now on the line. Now they're being tested. Now they're having to search Jesus and say, Jesus, like, don't you care about us? Like, we're about to drown. Like, will you do something? Now, I want you to know this. I've been saying this throughout the series, but we need to realize why Jesus does miracles. The reason he does miracles isn't because we got it all together. It's because he has it all together and he cares about us. These disciples don't have it together now. They are the epitome in this moment of not having it together. They are doubtful, fearful. They're unbelieving. They are anxious. They are frantic. They're coming to him out of that place like, Jesus, are you going to do something? I've been guilty many times, and I said this in my first point of preaching, that you have to have faith if you're going to get a miracle. There's often times where Jesus will correct people for their unbelief, and there was a portion where he said he didn't do many things in that region because of their unbelief. And so I think there is an important aspect of faith connecting to God and that bringing a miracle. I really do believe that. But where I've preached this wrong in the past is I say you have to have faith to get a miracle. No, you don't. Why did I say that? The disciples don't have faith. They weren't trusting the Lord fully in this. They do come to him and they're looking to him for an answer, but like they are very afraid and they do not think. And so he has to correct them for their unbelief, but he corrects them for their unbelief and then he still does the miracle. He corrects them for their unbelief, but then he does the miracle to grow their faith. And so I want you to understand that you don't have to have it together for you to receive something from God. Matter of fact, there's going to be many times where you're just like them. They were doubtful, but guess what? Jesus was faithful. They were fearful, but Jesus was peaceful. They were weak, but Jesus was strong. They were out of control, but Jesus was in control. Christian, don't ever think you have to have it all together and you have to be perfect for God to actually work in your life. He actually works in the middle of your imperfection. This is why we can trust him even more. This is why he needs to actually correct us many times for our unbelief, because whether we got it together or not, he still will move on our behalf. That is so awesome to me. Because a lot of times we put pressure on ourselves to get the miracle from God. Preachers will put that pressure on you. I've done that before in different, meetings and ministry in the past. But the more I understand God, the more I understand him working despite me. He'll work sometimes in the middle of a situation where I was like, God, like I really bombed it. I did not do good on that message. And there were a lot of people who got saved. You know why he does this? Just to teach me at the end of the day, I'm still not in control. At the end of the day, it all comes back to what he does, to his power, his ability, his grace, his anointing. It's all about him. It's never about us. We're just in this journey. And so sometimes we go through the storm, but it's Jesus who can calm the storm. Would you just take a moment and consider what the Holy Spirit is saying to you? Would you just bow your heads in prayer?
Thanks for joining us for worship today. I'm John Collier, and I hope today has inspired you to love God and to love others more. We always want to take some time at the end to pray for you, especially if this is the first time of believing that Jesus Christ is your Lord and Savior. Let's pray. Father, forgive us of our sins. Thank you for sending your Son to die on the cross and raise again so that he can be king and we don't have to be. Help us to learn more about you so we can live more like you. We want you to connect with us, and we want to connect with you. You can comment down below or go to diversitychurch.net, and we'll see you again next week.